So, I recently went back and reread one of my favorite Superman runs, Grant Morrison's Action Comics from 2011. And as I was reading, I realized something. This book feels like a more effective demonstration of the realistic, darker take on Superman that has been perpetuated across media for the past few years. To add some context, we've had a ton of Superman adaptations in the past number of years, whether it be direct adaptations of Superman himself or the essentially Superman knockoffs. And one thing that's been consistent in these adaptations is the premise of grounding Superman, or a character similar to Superman, in a darker, gritty, more realistic world. Now, Christopher Nolan, the director of the famous and critically acclaimed Dark Knight trilogy, gained the reputation of inserting a superhero like Batman into a world very similar to our own, promising a realistic take on the character. That same concept was applied during the development of Man of Steel, as Nolan was a producer and was also involved in the film story development. And I don't think it's difficult to see just how much that concept has bled into other adaptations of Superman or versions of Superman. Now, obviously this premise has existed and been present in superhero media long before Nolan ever touched the genre. However, Nolan pretty much popularized the concept due to the massive success of his Dark Knight trilogy, and I guess that led to studios and filmmakers taking that as a formula for success within the genre. Now, this isn't going to be a video of me criticizing the premise in question, as I do think it's an interesting one that definitely could challenge the characters in ways we rarely see. However, I do think that these adaptations lose their way by turning them into almost completely different characters in the process of trying to ground them. But Grant Morrison's Action Comics excels in executing that premise in my opinion, and I'm not even sure if that was their goal, but they nailed it. Grant Morrison's Action Comics basically chronicles the early adventures of a younger Clark Kent in Metropolis, still trying to find his own way. It's set in a world that is still very much getting used to the idea of metahumans, as they don't have as deep a recognized history as they normally do in other continuities. And that creates a lot of similarities to our world, where metahumans obviously don't exist, as far as we know. It also makes Superman a controversial figure when he first appears in Metropolis, and that creates a lot of tension and inner conflicts for Clark. But what I loved most about this run is that it's still the same Clark that we know and love. The corny farm boy from Kansas who just cares so much about helping people because it's the right thing to do. And the world doesn't buy that, they insist he has sinister intentions. I mean, Lex Luthor in particular disregards him as a human being entirely. And yeah, that goes without saying for Lex Luthor. But I think in a lot of ways, Lex in this story is representative of the general attitude towards Superman. And I love the conflict that creates for Clark. The hate doesn't make him question if humanity is worth it or can be trusted. It rather makes him question himself and if he is good enough. And I think that speaks volumes to the kind of person and hero he is. Clark doesn't have much in this universe. His ma and pa have long passed and he's essentially alone as Superman and Clark Kent. But he still does the right thing, he still saves people, and he still loves to do it. When the world is in danger, he doesn't hesitate to save it just because the world hates him. He doesn't even think twice before going onto Brainiac's ship to save the same people who spat in his face. And I think that's much more impactful. Clark doesn't let this darker, more hateful world dictate his personality. He's still Superman, and that defies expectations in a compelling way, I feel. I mean, isn't that what these heroes are supposed to be? The basic point I'm trying to make is that I'm not against flipping the narrative on our favorite superheroes. I'm not against deconstructing these characters. Heck, I'm making a video praising a deconstruction of sorts of Superman. And some of his greatest stories, or some of the greatest stories in general we've had, are character deconstructions. But it needs to be something that challenges the same character we know, instead of creating a completely different character with a familiar symbol stamped onto the front. I mean, what even is the point if that's what you're going to do? I think Grant Morrison's Action Comics truly challenged the same character we know and love, and I believe that this is infinitely more interesting and compelling than this, because it allows us to truly understand what makes these heroes who they are outside the superficial. It's not the traditional super suit or the love interest or the Uncle Bens and Ma and Pa Kents. These elements are important for sure, but ultimately these characters are who they are because they choose to be. And I think that exploring that avenue as a way to give characters their own agency is much more rewarding. But anyway, I just wanted to show some love to Grant Morrison's Action Comics, as well as prove, or at least attempt to prove, that it is possible to tell a Superman story set in a darker, more realistic world that honors the same character from the source material and uses that new setting to challenge the same character. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and please feel free to let me know your thoughts in the comments. I believe a lot more can be said about this that I may not have touched on, and I would love to hear from anyone else. So yeah, thanks for watching.